Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I like that though. I didn't want to interject, but it makes me wonder because we are talking about children and dealing with loved ones. Essentially, if you open up that umbrella a little bit, when dealing with other people that you know are have bad habits, or when your child grows up and maybe they like to steal a cookie every once in a while or too many, what's your perspective in giving them empathy or just kind of guiding them or providing them with support? Because sometimes we can't change people around us, but we want to support them the best we can.
Yeah, I would say again, meeting it with compassion, which means giving it a place, right? So I catch my daughter stealing a cookie. I'm not going to come right my own personal philosophy. I'm not going to come down on her and say that's wrong. This is what you shouldn't do, and let just kind of yell at her, that kind of thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions. Why did you do that? Why did you feel like you had to sneak it instead of asking? Is there something about our relationship that makes you feel uncomfortable? Or maybe they're exploring stealing for the first time, right? Everybody's stolen, whether it's a big thing or a small thing. At some point that urge is going to show up. So I want to mature and educate these desires. I want to educate it and so that they can understand where it's coming from, how it works, and that it's okay, and at the same time it's not okay, right? We don't steal, right? It's not the right thing to do. There are other ways to go about it. Stealing might seem like the easiest way, but the easiest way isn't always the best way. That's kind of how I would approach it.
Yeah, and I like that because I feel like a lot of the parents I've seen, even in my adulthood or growing up, we were for certain things that we would do, our parents came down on us hard.
Mm.
And we learned to kind of whatever the urge was that made us do that action, or we kind of put that away and kind of tucked it in the corner. And then when you become an adult, kind of creeps up, it starts to come out in different interpersonal relationships. And um, it's nice that you're giving your daughter that gift of understanding those urges or reasoning behind why they're doing certain things instead of just doing it unconsciously.
Yeah, because man, there's so much that can go wrong as you're raising a child, or even in just relationships with people. But in terms of raising a child, you don't want to thwart their desires, right? You
Mm,
don't want them to feel like at a base level that they can't have certain desires. Some are okay, some are not, and it's more about again educating it and maturing it so they understand which I said. So they're all okay, but the fact is you want to know where it's coming from, right? Because that's really what matters. It's where's something coming from. The behavior is changeable, right? You can correct behavior, but you don't want to make the child feel like they're wrong because they've done something that's not proper at that moment. you know
yeah, it's
because then you just want to finish, because then they go through life kind of rolling along because they can't include their own desires, right? So they're not really in the world at that point. So that's, yeah, it can make a big difference in a kid's life.
Yeah, because as I've grown older and become an adult, it's been about integrating the things that really made me happy as a kid, whether they were part of my shadow per se, or they're part of like what I like to showcase in the world. Because at a certain point, you have to be able to integrate those things within your life, in my opinion, or from my perspective today, at least. So I have
Yeah.
to agree with that a lot.
While we're actually on that topic, there was something I wanted to share. I was listening to the book, Tim, that you recommended to me a while ago, Soul Without Shame. And this
Hmm.
part stood out to me. It said, part of growing up is learning to control your self-expression, not saying everything that comes into your mind and not always expressing your feelings, such as a dislike, a revulsion, fear, or desire, because it's not appropriate in many situations. For a child, this is difficult to grasp. Often learning to suppress the expression of a feeling or thought leads to suppressing the feeling or thought itself.
Hmm.
So for example, a child may think if I shouldn't express my anger, that must mean anger is bad. And if I
Hmm.
can't express it, then what's the point of feeling it? What comes to your mind, Tim, when you hear this kind of scenario?
Yeah, well, it speaks to, right, first of all, you have to meet the development of the child, right? What can the child's intelligence take in at this particular moment, right? So you don't want to give the wrong, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't want to steer them. You don't want to give them the wrong idea of what's allowed and what's not allowed. Yeah, again, you want to mature it, right? So everything, again, compassion and action means everything has a place. You just want it to be in relationship to what's actually going on in your environment, right? So as you're older, we know, there's a time and place for sharing your personal stuff, or for getting in the way and telling somebody, no, don't do that, right? There's just, you have to tolerate things differently and act differently. As a child, it's, child's kind of have a free, they can say what they want for the most part, right? And they're just expressing themselves. We can't take it personally, right? So I think as long as a child feels like they can be as they are, over time they'll figure out the rest. They'll know, it just, with the, they'll screw up from time to time, but they'll feel like they can repair the relationships and they can grow. And that's ultimately what you want, because we're not going to be perfect. So you want to give them that foundation that says you won't be perfect, but you can learn from it, and you can evolve from it, and you can become a better person from it.
Do you feel like that's the underlying message that you are sort of conveying with the Briatic approach, like in terms of their judgment, like their internal voice, their super ego? Do you feel like that's the undertone, that like, I can, I'm not a terrible person if I do this. I can learn from this. There's always something to, you see what I'm saying?
I think so, because the Briatic approach, again, it's about letting things just be simply as they are. So the road to Bria, if you're going to be a consciousness explorer and being on a healing journey, basically means working through all of your historical stuff so that you're not bringing memory into the present moment. You're not bringing your history into the present moment, which allows you to relate to it as it is. So bring me back to your question.
Yeah, just the development of the super ego, the internal parent, that you hear throughout your lifetime as an adult. Mine's is very overcritical, and so I'm learning to dial it back a bit and
Yeah.
learning to talk to myself in more gentle ways. So I'm just wondering, as you're raising a child and how you disciplined or raise your child, a lot of it goes into how they parent themselves as they get older.
Yeah, and that's again why you want to set the stage for um, allowing things to be as they are, so that they can have their own relationship to it while getting the guidance, right? So you don't want them to hurt themselves, and you don't want them to act poorly in certain situations. So you meet it as it is, and they'll grow, they'll learn, and look, it's inevitable, right? There's going to be times when she's just not going to understand. You can't have that toy today, and she's going to feel like her sense of self isn't big enough to tolerate that. So she's going to hate me. She's going to hate the world. She's going to hate everything, for that time being. And, that might lead to some inner voice down the road that she might have to deal with when she grows up in therapy, right? I mean, the only reason why you have a critical part of yourself is because somebody was critical in your life. So you internalize it, and that critic it has a job, right? If you did the healing work with it, you could sit down and ask it, okay, this part of myself, how old do you think I am right now? And it might say like 3 years old, 5 years old. You might say, so what are you afraid of? What are you afraid might happen if you stop doing your job? And that part of yourself might say, you're going to die, or you can't take care of yourself, or you're going to get in really bad trouble, And then as an adult, you need to relate to that in a new way, and sort of just restructure your relationship to this helper, right? This aspect of your consciousness has been helping all your life, but it's out of relationship with who you are now, and you want to be free of it in a certain sense. So I don't think you can ever really, no one's going to have perfect parents, so they're always going to have to do that kind of work. You just want to lessen the blow as much as possible.